Welcome to the fourth DTG COVID-19 Transforming the TV Industry webcast series. So, as part of our TV Transformers project, we put together this series of webcasts and teamed up with lead analysts and experts. This week, we're looking at the resilience of the internet with EY. I'm delighted to be joined by Adrian Baschnonga, lead analyst for global telecoms at EY. And to give us some of their insights on internet resilience, we are joined by a panel of industry experts and, of course, you who can ask questions throughout. So please welcome Maria, Noel, and Ian, who will now introduce themselves. Maria?
Yeah, hi. I'm Maria Ingold. I'm CEO of mireality. I'm the former CTO of a Disney Sony joint venture, and I built the on-demand movie service for Virgin Cable and Channel 4, amongst others. And I've been consulting for the last 8 years internationally in video on demand. And I'm also a board advisor for iSize, who is doing bitrate reduction using machine learning and as a pre-coder, so it doesn't alter the workflow.
Excellent. And Noel?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Noel Penzer. I head up vastly across EMEA and also internationally. I've been with the business for 3 years, and we're one of those companies that sits between the services and the end users.
And Ian?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Ian Parr here from BT. I look after the ISP infrastructure for the BT consumer brands. That's PlusNet, EE, and BT, of course. And with another hat on, I also look after much of the contribution and distribution network infrastructure for the UK terrestrial TV services.
Thank you, Ian. So I'm going to be helping the discussion along today and asking any questions from you. Please be kind but inquisitive. We want to hear your questions and submit these via the QA box, which is underneath the slides window. So now I'd like to welcome Adrian to introduce himself and present his research.
Thanks very much, Richard. And my name's Adrian Baschnonga. I'm EY's lead analyst for global telecommunications. So I drive a lot of our thought leadership, research and insights into the sector. One big project we've been running recently, in fact for a few years now, is around decoding the digital home, which is essentially looking at how consumer attitudes are evolving in the home. So we run an annual program of research, and I will be sort of running through some of the findings, but particularly a survey that we've run during the COVID-19 lockdown period. So in terms of just thinking through the agenda, I think we're going to start off looking at the program itself, what it said historically, and then really zooming into what we're seeing from a COVID-19 perspective. And I very much sort of pulled out the internet resilience findings, zooming into broadband, how happy consumers are, what do they think of their service providers, and certainly that should offer some interesting food for thought. So without further ado, I'll just move into the program itself. So we have been running this program now for a number of years. We did conduct a survey in the back end of 2019 that very much looked at consumer attitudes across technology, media, telecommunications, attitudes to broadband providers, broadband speed, broadband reliability, but also more widely looking at content streaming, changing TV behaviors, smartphone activity in the home. We followed that up in April with a survey of consumer sentiments during the COVID-19 period, and really interested to see what's changing, what's top of mind right now during this very unprecedented period. So thinking about, what was top of mind before, the crisis began, and these data sets really sort of coming from the back end of 2019, but they'll give you a sense of really consumer sentiment as it was, before lockdown. And I think what's interesting to sort of think about here is we actually saw quite a lot of desire for digital downtime. So over a 3-year period, we saw more and more people saying, actually, I'm seeking time away from my smartphone and other internet-enabled devices. And that was actually most pronounced among younger customers, younger consumers. This fear of too much screen time, perhaps being not good for you, certainly was becoming more and more amplified in our results. Thinking about broadband and internet resilience more specifically, we also saw this rising focus on reliability rather than just headline speed. So actually a rising proportion of households saying, actually for me, reliability is more important than speed. Now you may argue that speed is a function of reliability, and a fluctuating speed is an unreliable connection. But this issue of reliability was already pronounced, shall we say, before the crisis. And if we think about sort of the broadband proposition itself, in a market full of bundles, there was a sense coming from consumers really that, there was a degree of complexity there. 4 in 10, more than 4 in 10 households saying, actually, I can't quite evaluate the difference between the different packages on the market. A lot of people saying, actually, these introductory offers, they make it more difficult for me to work out which package represents the best value. And actually a substantial rump of people saying, I'm not sure I actually understand what speed means and how it relates to using the internet. And as part of our our overarching program, we've got an attitudinal segmentation of households, 8 different groups. Some are very attuned to technology in the home, your digital devotees, your premium and proud customers. They like big bundles of big connectivity. But what we actually saw year on year was that some of the groups feeling pain points, drowning in digital customers, who kind of struggle to engage with packages, service propositions, customer support. They're actually increasing as a proportion of the total, alongside disengaged users, and these tend to be quite apathetic customers. They're quite knowledgeable, they're just not necessarily that engaged with different types of packages. So I think that's some sort of scene setting, the direction of our findings over the last couple of years. But what about COVID-19? What about the lockdown period? And we conducted a survey of 2,000 households beginning of April, really trying to sort of uncover how they were feeling, how they were responding to technology, to connectivity content inside the home since lockdown began. And I think first off, and this was very interesting for us, is that actually, broadband mobile providers actually perceived very positively during the crisis. So if you think about, how they've been perceived, a lot of people saying, actually, I think they've been coping very well during the COVID-19 situation. And they actually scored ahead of streaming TV providers, news publishers, social media websites. In fact, they weren't too far below the NHS, believe it or not. So there was a lot of sort of praise, implicit praise for connectivity providers that they'd actually stood up very well to increase demand. And I think we've seen reports of, certainly an increased network load since about mid-March. And the same was true actually of mobile providers. Again, a lot of people saying, yeah, these companies have done well during the crisis. And I think we've seen an uptick in mobile voice calls, mobile usage. Even though people have been at home, they've been making more phone calls. So certainly some good news there. What I think is interesting is typically you see that kind of positive sentiment most pronounced for these questions in terms of smaller households, in terms of people size. And I think that's an interesting lens that we can apply to the data throughout these latest survey findings, thinking about the ages where perhaps there's an over or under indexing in terms of sentiment and the same in terms of household size. When we think about sort of current broadband packages, for example, they're certainly seen as fit for purpose. you know, a lot of we asked, you know, well, we had a statement saying my home broadband package is sufficient to meet my household's needs during the coronavirus situation. 4 in 5 households agree. In fact, it was older age groups that were most likely to agree with that. 18 to 24, 25 to 34, less likely to agree. And again, larger households, less likely to agree with that. What does this mean in terms of switching propensity? You know, it's something that we've tracked over a number of years in our survey. We didn't find you know, a huge uptick in people saying, you know, I'm looking for a different provider. You know, most people saying actually the COVID-19 situation has made no difference. You know, 81% there. So again, some interesting findings. However, you know, if we think about sort of, you know, potentially a reduction in broadband quality during the lockdown, you know, 25% of households did say, yeah, I am concerned by a reduction in the quality of my broadband service since the beginning of the coronavirus situation. This was most pronounced among 25 to 34-year-olds, again with 18 to 24-year-olds kind of in second place. And that's very much in line with what we've seen, you know, historically, that actually it's younger age groups that tend to become a little bit more restless, or certainly they come out of our surveys in that way, in terms of sort of thinking, actually, am I getting the right kind of connectivity here? And again, you know, more people in 2 or 3 person households with 2 or 3 kids likely to agree that they were concerned about a reduction in broadband quality. And also, if we think about the this trade-off, if you like, between internet resilience, internet reliability over the speed of the connection, you know, 40% of people actually saying, I really, you know, this situation has made me realize that I value resilience, I value the reliability of my home broadband above the headline speed, with only 12% disagreeing. What I thought was interesting here was actually, you know, propensity to agree with that was highest in, you know, both 18 to 24 and 55 plus. So it kind of feels like the market at large has really thought, actually, I need this reliable connection, you know, whether that's working from home because I've got an uptick in streaming, online education's happening at home, but it was pretty consistent there. So the kind of over-under indexing that we've seen with other questions didn't apply so much there. And again, it's people in larger households who are typically more likely to agree that resilience and reliability are top of mind for them. So that's, you know, all well and good. Everyone's thinking resilience, reliability. I need a connection that doesn't cut out. But what does that mean in terms of the kind of package that they need? Because in some ways, that's almost counterintuitive, a couple of our findings. We can see that resilience and reliability are top of mind, but we also see that, you know, 4 in 5 people say, no, my current package is absolutely fine. But when we asked, we got another agreement statement, just trying to explore this connection between current demand levels, and I think there is market data suggesting internet load has gone up. Do people need to upgrade to a full fibre broadband connection? I think we're quite surprised to see that was 8% in terms of agree that statement. What was interesting is, again, markedly more pronounced among, you know, digital natives, if you like, or those under 34 years old. So clearly younger groups more interested in that upgrade. And again, more pronounced in larger households. And we also sort of put the same statement to them in terms of 5G upgrades. And obviously, you know, all UK networks now switched on. And again, you know, pretty low number there, 11% saying, you know, the promise of 5G mobile, greater reliability, greater speed has become more appealing. A large number of people, you know, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, or you know, 43% just flat out disagree. So I think we thought that was a pretty interesting takeaway. Resilience is top of mind. A lot of people think their packages suit them, but they're still, you know, 1 in 4 worried about reliability, but not really translating into an uptick in, upgrade willingness, if you like. And then if we think about, other aspects of the customer journey, if you like, those people who had tried getting in touch with the call center, 26% had something of a challenging experience, if you like. Whether it was to ring up to inquire about, a package upgrade or a package downgrade or some kind of pricing adjustment, there's clearly some sense of anxiety there. And again, that's more pronounced amongst the younger age groups and more pronounced among larger households. So some interesting food for thought there. Obviously, call center, social distancing and lockdown very much under pressure. We did actually find that a lot of customers are actually much more open to and engaged with the idea of distance, with chatbots, instant messaging, perhaps a corollary with people doing a lot more multitasking from home, able to contact customer support while doing something else. And again, we thought that was a pretty interesting takeaway. But again, some food for thought there, that when people need more information, they're more engaged with their broadband package, they will want to contact customer support. Are they always getting the right answer or not? And I think we've got some interesting data there. So at that point, I'll probably take a pause and Richard, hand back over.
Adrian, thank you very much. Very interesting. I've had a few interesting chatbot moments myself, actually, on things in the last week or so. One of the things that was all from the consumer's point of view, I realised, but one of the things that I was intrigued by is are businesses changing how they're adapting their proposition? And Noel, are you seeing a change in your customer base and what they're doing?
We've certainly seen a change in some in terms of how they have needed to be able to scale up quicker. The need for how they've had to shift how their teams are working. How empowered are engineers, etc. How agile and how quickly they can respond. But certainly because of there has been an increase in demand, and that has meant an increase in usage, and in terms of some fairly significant figures. But we've certainly seen a change in terms of how our customers are needing to respond to the market conditions, and certainly thinking about streaming. Usage is up. Thankfully, everything has stood up, right? So the internet is more than resilient from our perspective. But then looking into how our customers are operating and how some of those who are on fairly significant continual transformation journeys anyway, there are some that are having to accelerate parts of that, not just about what a consumer proposition is, but actually how their teams are working. Are they empowered? Are they agile? Can they actually move quickly enough? Are they considering the right tools and the right platforms to enable them to be able to differentiate in terms of how they deliver, let alone how they differentiate as a service? But yeah, there's been some fairly significant shifts amongst our customer base, both in terms of how they've had to deal with some negative impacts, but also some from a positive impact, of course.
Good. One of the questions that's come in has said, the survey treated resilience, reliability and speed as discrete attributes. With specific regard to streaming, were consumers asked about buffering or picture quality, adaptive bit rate, etc.? I guess particularly mindful of some of the global streaming companies winding back their services. Adrian, any?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't actually ask about buffering, but just so everyone knows, we're actually doing a follow-up survey to run in the next few days, where we will be explicitly addressing that, thinking around sort of buffering and picture quality. And what we did find out in our survey was certainly there's been a pretty dramatic uptick just in the space of 3 or 4 weeks in terms of people using TV streaming more, people doing it for the very first time. 20% of households doing video calling for the very first time. That was actually more pronounced in 44s plus, people staying in touch with other members of their family, calling friends, etc. And a big uptick as well in terms of people being online at the same time. All of those are going to feed into, potentially some concerns about the resilience of the picture and picture quality, lag time, latency, etc. We will be exploring that further in our follow-up, call it COVID Part 2, if you like.
Great. And whether Ian and Maria want to come in on a couple of these points as well.
Yeah, just on the TV picture quality piece. Yeah, you've already mentioned that some of the OTT content providers like Netflix had reduced their bit rate in collaboration with a lot of the operators like BT to help the networks. But in reality, our network is scaled and resilient enough to be able to cope with the demand that we're seeing anyway. Although we've seen 100% growth in the daytime consumption of content, including OTT content from the likes of Netflix. Other services are available during the daytime. The peak time evening viewing, though it's increased by around 20%, hasn't exceeded the peak figures that we'd seen previously in December 2019 for the Amazon football, for example. So we've got enough capacity there to provide that continuity and quality of experience. There may be some perception as a result of the Netflix bitrate reduction that quality had reduced somewhat. I haven't seen that myself, but also, interestingly, Ofcom published a report last week, their annual report actually, which included section 4 covering the early period of this COVID crisis through March. Which again called out some real data measurements for Netflix and Facebook type performance during this crisis period. And although they report a small amount of degradation, on the whole, the service from based on real data measured by Ofcom has held up really well.
Good. And I guess in a way there are some new techniques to help with improving the performance on the same bandwidth, Maria. And if you've got any observations, you're thinking of machine learning and.
Yeah, so I'm going to just fill in some of the blanks for some of the statistics that people are talking about. So when this started, Akamai noticed that they had a 30% increase in traffic, which equates to about a year's worth of growth in a few weeks. And Sandvine did an update report for COVID and noticed that globally traffic has increased 38%, but video is still about 60% of that. And if we hadn't reduced the quality levels, it would have been about 70%. And so what Netflix did was reduce about 25%. And it did that by taking off the top tiers of each of the adaptive bitrate ladders. And then other companies like YouTube said, okay, well, we'll just set everything to SD by default. And for Nest, we're going to use medium quality rather than high quality. So people were approaching this in different ways. And Netflix has just now resumed all of its quality levels. But that's not sustainable. So you can't keep lowering quality. Some people will notice the difference, not everybody. And some things, like if you're just searching on news and an SD article on YouTube is fine, but you may want to watch something else in HD or 4K content if you've got a 4K TV. So there's a couple of aspects around this to notice. One is that when these companies reduced the quality, they were also able to save costs. So if you have 1 million people watching an hour a day at, say, 1 gigabyte of data, then that is sort of SD to HD type level. And if it's at sort of a standard, not standard, let's say what Disney pays, which is 0.0025, which is what Streaming Media Magazine evaluates they're doing, then for 1 million people watching that 1 hour, you're spending about $1 million per year. And with YouTube having 1 billion hours per day, that's nearly 1 billion per year. So if you save 25% on that, you're saving something like 228 million, which is a lot. So there are a whole bunch of different technologies to do this, one of which is things like what Netflix has done, looking at the encoding of each individual title. But there's also things like what I'm doing with iSize, which is pre-coding. So it's before the encoder, it's single frame latency. And it uses machine learning to figure out which parts of the image are important, which parts are less important. And it basically reverses perceptual measurement in order to figure out how to make this more efficient. So it increases quality by perceptual measurement, but also reduces bit rate. So there's a number of different things that people are using in order to try to solve this for the long term.
I think maybe we can come back to some of those points, because it's one of the areas that we're really interested in at the DTG is what are the changes in the industry that are going to be more permanent. So I think there have been some kind of temporary and transient things that have gone on, but also I think we're going to see some things that are going to be much more permanent, and maybe we can come back to those later. Adrian, maybe we'll, if you'd be so kind, we'll go back to your research and see what else it tells us.
Absolutely, Richard. So just a little focus on home working. And I think this was, very interesting in terms of our research, just trying to understand how the worlds of, home and work are starting to collide and converge, and, what that means for connectivity. So certainly in terms of, households increasing the amount of remote working, using applications like Teams, Skype, Zoom, we've seen a big uptick there, and it's really led by those younger groups, certainly 55 years plus, acting as outliers, if you like. But I think what we thought was very interesting is, people sort of struggling to actually set up the communications, the connectivity to enable this world of, collaboration, conferencing, apps. If we think about the smartphone revolution of, 10 plus years ago, it was a very effortless experience. We found out in our research actually that, 11% of people have had a problem. I think what we thought was very surprising was it rises to 1 in 5 of those younger groups who've actually struggled to get everything working. And there was a sort of sense, coming from the research, that stitching everything together for this new normal, if you like, is a little bit troubling. It's not the mature world of the broadband and TV bundle that people have been buying for 10, 15 years. It's not the smooth operating universe of smartphone and smartphone app store. There was this idea that people are trying to sort of get their setup right, but not all of them are succeeding. And we also asked consumers, what changes do you think businesses will make or will continue to make following the end of the coronavirus situation, i.e. when the UK government considers it to be under control. So, that's open to interpretation, but when things are a bit more stable, clearly, an expectation that employers will, provide the right hardware and the right software to work from home if they need to. Clearly, baking in these communication and collaboration applications into sort of business as normal. Clearly, and again, probably quite interesting, to see that, yes, safeguards to protect employees, greater encouragement of home working, more flexible working in terms of time. I think what we were, quite surprised to see was that, ensure employees have the right connectivity, e.g. broadband, mobile security, but that was just a little bit further down the list because, again, connectivity has been absolutely top of mind. Hardware, software, an application is a form of software, again, top of mind, but actually the right connectivity setup underpinning all of this, just a little bit further down that top tier of considerations. And I think that's interesting because actually, if you look at a lot of the news flow in recent weeks, last couple of months, there have been a lot of direct communications from broadband providers, mobile providers, actually leadership emailing subscribers with tips on how to improve performance with reassurance about network quality. Ofcom has provided some detailed tips on where to place your router, the fact you shouldn't have your microwave on if you're trying to conduct a video call. You need to use an Ethernet cable. You need to probably unplug your devices. Some other research showing that 50% of households have had arguments over who's causing a slow internet connection. So actually these kind of like elemental issues around connectivity, clearly there has been demand for more guidance, but interestingly didn't come through as strongly in terms of what's the expectation on employers, if you like. And then just moving on to sort of maybe a piece that just brings it all together. What do we see on the back of this research, at least from the connectivity side of things, being very important going forward? I think, a key takeaway or a part of the forward look, especially if you're an operator or an entity involved in providing connectivity, some very interesting, good perceptions from consumers. What we thought was interesting is if you look at net promoter scores, for example, utility companies, connectivity providers tend to underscore compared to software providers, for example, historically. I think in terms of who's coping well, the responses were flipped somewhat, and actually the connectivity providers came out on top. So how can you sort of maximize that and sustain that positive perception going forward? And I think Ian touched upon some of the Ofcom data. There has been some sort of hard data showing that network loaders, withstood increased demand. Some very good signals there coming from customers themselves. How do you sustain that going forward? Having said that, you've got this sort of 20%, 25% who are very sensitive to a potential reduction in internet resilience. Again, 1 in 4 have had a poor call center experience, and we can see that actually younger users over-index on some of these frustrations, particularly around things like network speed, larger households, more people online at the same time too. So how is it best to address some of these frustrations? What kind of segmentation of households is required to isolate some of these specific areas of need and future demand? And that probably takes us on to the next point as well. Internet resilience, absolutely top of mind, overall positive perception of connectivity providers, but actually the technology upgrade appetite was much more muted. 20% of people, 25%, I'm concerned about a reduction in quality. Only 8% saying I would like to upgrade to full fiber, gigabit fiber broadband. Again, in terms of appetite for 5G, that was quite muted. There's a lot of talk around, can 5G become another form of connectivity for the home given its higher speeds? We didn't really see that sort of translating into demand for those services, this increased demand for resilience. So I think, again, an interesting question for connectivity providers there. And also just the most recent slides discussed, thinking about how the worlds of home and office are converging and how should value propositions evolve to meet this new normal. Clearly, in terms of the bundle, it's been very sort of consumer connectivity, TV-centric to date, maybe with some smart home digital assistants thrown in. But what about the working from home aspect as well? Is there more that can be provided or bundled indeed to households going forward? So at that point, I'll pause and Richard, back over to you.
Thank you, Adrian. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, first week of lockdown, I invested in a 5G all-home solution because I realised I was fighting with my neighbours and their kids for bandwidth. But I mean, one of the things that we're hearing is from a number of sources is that viewers' tolerance of lower quality is expected at the moment, but the likelihood is their expectations for Ultra HD performance going forward with large screen TV sales still sustaining remarkably well, actually, during the crisis. So do you think viewers their expectations will be raised again on quality once we get out the other side of this? Adrian?
Yeah,
I think there's, I think there's clearly a really interesting question about how much of these elevated expectations become part of the new normal. So clearly, interest in quality is there. It comes out very strongly. I think, and I'll just speak to the sort of the connectivity piece. Often people react kind of emotionally to connectivity when it degrades and it gets worse. It's really how much can you provide education around what higher connectivity, more robust connectivity can provide in the future. So I think a lot of the messaging in the market has historically been around, speed, headline speed, advertised maximum, minimum guaranteed. I think, more of a message around robustness, the ability to support fluctuating demand going forward. That's where you can sort of build a new type of quality message in that's around robustness and not just about top-end performance, if you like.
Right. Maria, were you trying to come in there?
Yeah, sorry, Adrian.
It's all right.
At least we're kind of in agreement there. So, yeah, I mean, Netflix has already lifted some of its bandwidth restrictions. So people are already excited that they can see 4K HDR again. So some people are very interested in what kind of quality they're going to see. And companies like Netflix have actually added 4 times their normal capacity in order to cope with this. So I think we're going to see things lift. We're going to see things sort of return. But Netflix is already trying to do things like move from transport layer security 1.2 to 1.3 because it gives it a little bit of efficiency. So everyone's looking for additional ways to find efficiency and keep the quality the same or increase it.
Ian, the whole house solution and the kind of multi-user home. Do you think that's the way forward? You've done a lot of work in this area.
I think it is. I picked up on some of the notes earlier around about larger households perceivably having challenges. I think so. We're finding now a lot of people are having to work from remote corners of their houses, their garages, and their sheds, and so on in this situation. And people are realizing that perhaps the Wi-Fi performance in home hasn't been as good as they would like it to be in this mode because they're having to do additional things. So absolutely, the whole home services that we and other operators provide are proving to be very popular, extending the reach of your Wi-Fi throughout your home so you can work and entertain yourself more effectively, has certainly been very popular and proved to be very popular during this period.
Noel, a lot of the discussion's been about consumers and we're all consumers / businesses, I guess, now at home. But do you see the way businesses are approaching this changing? That some of the stuff that came up from Adrian was this blended world that we're living in now, where our home and our business environments are very much one. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'll actually answer on the basis of probably what we can all see is that clearly there are industry sectors that are being impacted hugely by COVID-19 and what we're able and not able to do as consumers and also as businesses, right? There is also, within the broader media industry, there are sectors where at least the economic impact is greater even though demand is up. And I think to one of the points, which is we're seeing, consumption has increased, and the question I've heard asked by a few of our customers is, are we about to see the next shift, seismic shift in terms of how users are going to consume, whether it's media streaming, obviously, to the point about expectations. When we come out of this, will the expectations increase? Most likely. I think it's, from a commercial entities, and probably also some of the public sector as well, is that, I'm sure nobody's going to want to just come out and be another Me Too service. That companies and organizations are going to have to innovate their way out of this, right? There's going to be clearly a tough period, but there's going to be a need to innovate, both from a consumer proposition, but also they're going to need to innovate and differentiate in terms of how they get there. And it's early science, but we're starting to see that. And not because that something's not working today, because it is working, but because people are looking harder at going, what do we do now and what do we not do? And there's a few instances, as I say, it's early days, where we're seeing customers who are having to shift direction, or they're having to accelerate things they have planned further out. And I think I expect that we will see that more and more, especially within the media and streaming, and when things get back to
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I mean, if this this period has been a validation of the strategy that we've had to have a very close working relationship with content operators, OTT providers, and so on and so forth, to get a better understanding of our network. We've been pushing content closer to our consumers through caching deeper into the network in association with companies like Fastly and other big CDN operators, or content owners like Netflix, who have their own caching platform, of course. And we know that video content represents about 60% of the peak time consumption in our network. So that, our strategy of pushing that closer to the edge of our network has been really underpinned and vindicated as in this situation. But it's also brought operators much closer into collaboration with content owners and publishers as well, and not just the Netflix of the world, but also games publishers and downloads as well, which present us with periodic challenges with the scale of Fortnite or Call of Duty type downloads into our network. We're getting some really good momentum and collaboration with those content partners now to make sure that collectively our customers get the best possible experience through that kind of collaboration.
One of the questions, actually, I think I've probably scared all the people that have joined us online into being too kind and not asking any questions. Please don't be silent. Throw a few questions at us, a few curveballs by all means. One of the points that's come up is trust, and do viewers still kind of trust the IP delivery service? I know some of the earlier research that we looked at asked questions or points came up that actually there seemed to be a flip in demographic, that older people were trusting the internet and younger people were trusting it less. But Adrian, did trust come out at all in your research?
Oh yeah, definitely, and kind of exactly that. I mean, trust is a burning hot issue in terms of news quality, disinformation. These are really big topics, and actually, yes, it is younger users actually who are questioning what is the nature of trust these days, and are more likely to call that into question, which is quite interesting and counterintuitive. I mean, what we found historically, which again is pretty interesting, is that actually when it comes to different types of tech, media, telco providers into the home, that telcos actually probably top score in terms of trust and the ability to store and use data effectively. But it's certainly an important issue at the moment, and I think actually it quite nicely feeds into some of the conversation just now about collaboration and the need for trust between industries, if you like. We've also done some research of the emerging 5G market for enterprises and different verticals, and I think if you look at COVID-19 and you look at the kind of the future of government services, healthcare provision, etc. Technology can play a big role. VR and AR are now seen as important use cases for things like 5G. So how do you build a trusted ecosystem that can collaborate effectively while coping with some of these changing consumer sentiments around trust?
Well, one of the points that's come in from Jonathan Kay, who's a member of our Accessibility Forum, is that the all-party parliamentary disability group has actually pointed out that internet connectivity in this current situation has helped create a better level playing field for access to things like online museums and various things. There are some positives that are coming out, actually. Society has begun to adapt to make things slightly more accessible as part of this, which is always a positive thing, actually. Sometimes we need something like this to make us look at things. Maria, from your perspective, kind of looking forward, kind of the last kind of section of Adrian's research is kind of very much looking into the future. And looking forward, what do you think will businesses begin to adopt to help them adapt to this, and where do you think the future is?
I think because we're consuming so much more data and people have discovered there are opportunities to save money while customers have said, yes, but we still like quality. I think there are a number of different ways to do things like bitrate reduction. And the other side to bitrate reduction is the sustainability side to it. So Netflix's total energy consumption for 2019 was 451,000 megawatt hours, which is essentially how much it takes to power 40,000 American homes. And that was 2019, and that was an over 80% increase on the year before. So I think we're going to start seeing sort of a mix of looking at sustainability, looking at how we can save cost, and looking at how we can increase quality. And all of those things will move forward. And some of those things can be solved by the work that iSize is doing with its machine learning bitrate reduction. And I know that other companies will continue to innovate as well to try to figure out, how can we optimize and eke out a little bit more out of this while consuming less.
Of course, all of us not traveling is a huge climate benefit as well, isn't it? So there's swings and roundabouts. Ian, have you got any kind of comments on where we think things are going to go from a more permanent basis?
Yeah, we're in a new normal at the moment, and our traffic profiles and so on have been pretty consistent now for many weeks that we've settled into this new normal. I think, as things gradually start to get back to normal, we're looking at a number of things that we have learned and benefited from in this mode of working that we could take into a more normal way of working. But I also think, our focus on continuing to build our converged network, bringing together our 5G and our fixed line network and providing a plethora of converged services across a number of different access mediums will be something that we will continue to be laser focused on moving forward, because that will certainly continue to benefit folk, if this situation persists or reoccurs again. So, yeah, there are a plethora of things that we're looking at, both internally for our own workforce. We've made some massive changes to accommodate the volume of home working that BT, which is an organisation of around 100,000 people globally, many of whom are now working from home, have done. We're obviously working with our enterprise customers, small and medium enterprise size customers in particular, who've been hit hard by this situation, about what they can learn and how we can help them in what will be a future new normal situation. So there is lots of learning to be had from this situation across a number of different sectors.
Thanks, Ian. And Noel, I guess, one of the things that I've discovered, I'm a trustee at a university, and we've suddenly had to plan our future so that we could be in lockdown or not lockdown, or in and out of lockdown. And I know that with various schools across the world that they're planning for every eventuality now. But how do you think businesses can future-proof themselves? Because when we come out of the end of this, the one thing that we're going to have definitely learned is that we need to be better prepared.
Well, exactly. Actually, I'll touch on the one thing, rather than from a pure sort of think about a technology point of view, but we touched on it a couple of times, which is, how companies are clearly going to have to change in terms of perhaps their cultures and how we adapt to think about what teams are, considering more people will probably be working remotely, right? I mean, even when offices, etc., are reopened, we're able to go back into them, there's a likelihood that companies, and clearly some very large global companies, have announced that people will never have to go back to an office. Whether that's right or wrong, another debate. But it clearly it changes the culture of how you work with your people and how you engage with your employees and how you engage teams. And obviously we need the tools and the platforms to be able to do that, but also what are the ways that we're going to keep employees engaged? And we still need to have fun, even if it's not in person, right? So I think that's a really important part. We'll clearly see a shift in how companies think about themselves and their employees. And in terms of to the question, I think the key parts are going to be is, if we put it down to where we see some customers, these early ones, is, you may have bought a software for differentiation reasons, right, historically. Clearly, there's lots of companies who are ahead of this. But we just continue to see, and this situation has driven it, is that companies need to be, looking at and identifying what are the right tools and platforms that enable them to become a much more, let's say, engineering culture. And that's going to enable them to really, react quicker, be more agile, and deliver more faster. And we expect to see that. We have not just us, but within our market sector, there are really lots of things. But we are seeing the companies who are going, right, what do we need? There's lots of future proofing, whether it's being what does 5G have an impact, not on Fastly, but what's the impact of 5G positively, and also, but where are the opportunities? And we're just seeing people leap ahead where you start to see a much greater interest in what are the edge compute. So for us, the compute edge capabilities, right? We want to be able to do more in the cloud, at the edge of the cloud, rather than just in the central cloud. And so that is already, we're seeing momentum. Our customers and also non-customers are just becoming more inquisitive. And I think that's the key thing, is that what we'll see in the shorter term is a greater inquisitive nature amongst businesses about what is possible. And obviously that's great for us.
I mean, I'll just point out as well, other ways of working, we'll have seen it in this crisis. We're still managing to run, a BT Sport channel, obviously, and there have been some really innovative things with remote production in this crisis. You look at the relaunch of the Bundesliga football in the past week, which has proved to be tremendously popular and demonstrates the pent-up demand we have for live sport. But there's a lot of innovation gone in the content production space around remote production and remote working that will definitely be carried on into the post-COVID lockdown period as well. So it's fascinating, what will come out the other end of this lockdown.
Ian, I have a question for Ian on that. Do you feel like on the end-to-end from a content perspective, so we've all listened to the discussions DTG have been driven, a few other member bodies, about sort of production in the cloud. Do you see that it's going to accelerate companies moving more to that, and that standards, etc., are going to have to get better aligned to make this more feasible? Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, we could talk about the 5G standards for supporting production, remote production, distribution, and so on and so forth. We're all, chasing down the roadmaps and standards there to support things like the network slicing, the QoS capabilities of 5G, and so on and so forth. So yes, standards, absolutely, but absolutely more cloud working as well. We've got a strong push towards both public and private cloud for many of our own TV services and for those of our partners as well. So I absolutely see the foot firmly on the gas for those kinds of services, as well as remote production I've already mentioned.
It's interesting that there's kind of been a balance of people focusing on resilience, but also at the same time willing to fast fail and just do things quickly and fast just to get them done. And so we've kind of, talking to some people in production over the last week or so, they've been much braver and tried some things that they never would have tried. Things like I was talking to someone at AMV, a big ad agency, and they were saying that they directed a kind of Zoom advert that was done purely via a mobile phone, and it was kind of super tricky and super brave, but they pulled it off. And there's no way they would have wheeled out talent to do something like that previously. They would have, they'd have made sure that it was super high-end production values. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those things follow through as we go into the kind of post-COVID perspective. And we've got a few minutes left, and I thought maybe one by one, we could just go around and I'm mindful that we're publishing a State of the Nation for Television Innovation in June that we're partway through, and that research points that there are some areas of innovation in the UK, things like machine learning and AI and things that are really strong, and we've got a really good chance of helping lead the entire industry out of this in many ways. So I'll be quite keen to hear from the team, where do we think the UK is particularly strong, and where do we think that we can help lead the world from an innovation perspective? And maybe, ladies first, go with Maria.
Thank you. So I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, I'm going to keep talking about bit rate reduction and perceptual metrics, but one of the things that doing this kind of work does is, if you're reverse engineering perceptual metrics, it means that you're asking for people to improve that type of analysis as well. So there's kind of a symbiotic relationship there moving forwards. And I think that will form part of it. And I think that as companies like iSize do this innovation, we're going to figure out how that fits into maybe more pieces of a puzzle. So this can fit into any workflow at the beginning of it with the pre-coding part, but are there other ways to then further optimize things throughout that entire workflow, and can they all work together then? So I've written an article on this. It's in the resources section if everybody wants to have a look at that. And this is actually part of an ongoing series. So there will be one more in the future as well, coming soon.
Great. And Ian, where do you think we're particularly strong and we can lead?
Well, I think you've already alluded to it. I think, the UK has a great history and reputation in content creation and production. And I think we'll continue to provide leadership in those areas and in using technology in those areas to drive innovation and improve customer experience. And I think, coupled with, 5G and convergent fixed line mobile strategies, where we're enabling more people more remotely to produce that brilliant content. And our network is superb in the UK. It has withstood this climate with capacity to spare. And so I think we're doing some brilliant things here, and there'll be lots of learning that we can share through BT's customers and beyond moving forward.
And Noel?
Yeah, I'll concur with both Maria and Ian. I think it's, or I'll put it the way of that, the UK has always been incredibly creative, right, where it comes to media, content and technology. And I think the more that the content creators or the services that end users are using, the harder they push in terms of that creativity, the harder it pushes onto us as service providers. And funnily enough, we like being challenged. So, it's in terms of, I think that's where the UK has always been strong and will continue to be so. I don't think it's lost its voice, has it? Certainly in those areas, it's perhaps a few global players have come in and made more noise, but clearly the UK's got it and just needs to keep pushing.
Good. And Adrian, do you think consumer expectations are going to go back up after this? And where do you think the opportunities lie for us as an industry? Adrian?
I think, I'd probably actually echo what everybody else has said. Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
I'd very much concur with, great, super. I'd very much concur with what everyone else said. I think we've actually already made a lot of good running in areas like 5G. You look at the test beds, you look at the trials, you look at some of the use cases, 5G broad, for example. There is this sort of tight collaborative mindset between telco media in the UK. There's a very strong creative sector. That's a really good route forward, becoming more resilient by becoming more innovative. I think On the consumer front, I think it's really good news that customers are more engaged with connectivity, with content, with the packages. They're thinking about it more. And I think there's certainly an opportunity for the industry to kind of rethink the proposition, maybe move away from some of the sort of the legacy thinking just about speed to thinking about reliability and robustness more broadly, and trying to capitalize on this kind of newfound relevance of connectivity, if you like.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much, Adrian. Very insightful piece of research. We look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you to Noel, Ian, and Maria for very insightful input. And again, we look forward to engaging with you further. And thank you very much to those that have been listening and watching online. And please keep engaging with us. As I said, we will produce a report at the beginning of June on the state of innovation for our sector in the UK, which we're super excited about. And also, I think there's a great opportunity for us to continue to lead the world in our sector. You can catch up with our latest webcasts on viewer behaviour, the impact on entertainment and C devices on our website, dtg.org.uk/websites. dtg.org.uk/webcasts. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Our next webcast takes place next Thursday and is about the evolving access services as part of our Content for All, TV for All web series. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.